All right, ladies, gentlemen, welcome to another Both Sides podcast. We're here at AREC today in the Wingman stand. We're joined by New York City's #1 real estate agent, Clayton Orrigo. Mate, welcome.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. So, mate, I have to ask, first question, how did an Australian VA company actually get and land you in New York City? How did that happen? How did that come about?
It's so funny. So, you know, I have... it's all networking, right? I mean, Jonathan, you know, I got connected with Jonathan, and we started using Wingman ourselves. And so that was really the backstory. We met through a bunch of Aussie friends, and Jonathan and I went for a bite. We kind of hit it off. We had similar energy level, right? Kind of, you know, we're operating on the same high octane speed, and we hit it off. And then you know, one thing led to another. As I mentioned, I don't do this stuff. I talk for a living, but usually one-on-one, right, in an apartment. And so I don't do this for a living. And so Jonathan said, hey, would you mind popping on? You know, we've got a conference, the Wingman conference. And I said, hell, I'll jump on, like whatever. And I was in my office late at night, and I hopped on Zoom, and it wasn't until after the fact I realized how big my head was, you know, in the audience. And I was just kind of shooting the shit and being straight with everyone on kind of how I think about things. And from there, AREC and reached out and asked me to come out, and I had just got engaged, and I figured, you know, what better way to see Australia, or a better excuse to come out and talk for an hour and spend the rest of the next 8 days kind of exploring the beautiful country.
Yeah. Well, mate, you're obviously an anomaly in the industry worldwide. What do you think makes you or separates you from the rest of the pack in New York City? Because that's obviously the most hardest market to crack in the world. How have you been able to crack that?
So it's a layered question. So there's certain natural things that I'm good at. I don't need much sleep. I don't drink caffeine. No, I'm decaffeinated right now. And so there's some natural things that I'm just kind of tuned in, high octane, a lot of tolerance for pain. I had a deep passion for real estate and architecture. I was a kid when I was 16 years old driving around in high school looking at houses. I was very curious about that. But over 12 years, I've been able to kind of go from zero to here, which is, it's non-linear. I think the critical thing, and I talked about it today in the speech, was most people are on their heels with a machine gun and kind of spraying and praying and taking on any assignment. And I think when people can figure out survival, right, the greatest civilizations are the ones that figured out survival first. Because when you can figure out survival, you then have time to create, to think, to invent. And so I was able to early on figure out survival quickly. I had a pretty quick uptick in terms of like surviving, and I kept expenses really low. And I was then able to spend a lot of time thinking about what I wanted, and that's when I switched from this machine gun concept on the heels of my feet to being on the balls and having a sniper rifle and picking a specific segment of that market and penetrating it. So if you think about, you know, Excel and you scatter plot things on a map, right? Most brokers, it would be up, left, right. They'd have all these pins all over the place. Well, mine is like a bullseye. It's very, very, very tight. So I'm selling at 24th, 35th, 45th, all these buildings up and down the block. I'm not selling up, down, left, and right. I picked a zone, and from that zone, I expanded slowly, methodically. And I talked about it. I'm not messy. You know, I'm not the guy that's hungover. I'm highly social, somewhat introverted on like large settings, but I'm highly social, and I remember and I'm curious about everyone I meet. I research everyone I meet, and that formula, I think with a stroke of luck, a little bit of glitter on top, has allowed me and my team and my business partner, and I found an amazing business partner, which really helped put a turbo engine on my progression to kind of outkick my coverage. And you know, we're on a wave right now, and we're you know, #1 team in the city for the past couple of years, and that could change. But in this moment right now, with our energy level, our lack of distractions. Neither of us have kids. You know, my business partner and I both are you know, he's newly married. I'm just about to get married. We're in this perfect wave where we're pedal down. We're not taking our foot off the gas, and I think we have a lot more wave left, a couple more turns. But to answer your question very succinctly, it's some natural things, some interests, and then a tolerance for pain and a work ethic, because you know, I didn't grow up this way. I'm working for people who are extremely wealthy, and as long as you don't get caught up in that, that is it's either a carrot or a stick, and for me, that's a carrot.
You mentioned off air that you started work at 8 a.m. and you finish at 1 a.m. and you did that for how many years?
For about a decade. That was, I mean, those numbers may even be light at times. You know, I usually go to sleep around 1 or 2. I'm since newly engaged in my fiance's, you know, her love language is quality time, which is pretty fucked for her. I'm having to rebalance myself and adjust. So we're trying to make a rule that it's, you know, I don't start taking calls till 10 a.m. So that gives me 2 hours in the morning to work out, have a modality, a routine, a meditation, and then I try to put the phone down at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Which I know that sounds crazy that like I'm trying to put the phone down at 10, but there's an endless amount of business, and I really give a shit, because at the end of the day, I think you're only as good as your last battle, your last surgery. You're known for what you just did, right? Not what you've done. It's always what was just done. And so I really care. I care that things are done the right way. I care that clients are getting exactly what they want, what they deserve. They're paying us a hefty fee, and they deserve to get a lot. The problem with our business is scalability. So the more you do is just the more you work. The more you do, the more you do. So it doesn't scale. So at where we're doing 1.3 deals a day now, that doesn't scale. That's just me doing more surgeries, which means there's only so many time, so many hours in the day. I've been able to ride that wave for a while. We're going to try to find, quote unquote, some balance, whatever the fuck that means. But we'll have a lot of balance when I'm retired. Yeah. So that's how I think about it.
Can I ask you, Clay, you mentioned you're high octane, don't drink caffeine, can sleep, can operate on minimal sleep. What's that fuel? Like, how did you get this high octane energy? A lot of the high performers we interview have a trauma, a chip on their shoulder. There's something that's driving, that's creating this momentum energy.
Totally.
Did you have that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we all have trauma, right? I had a wonderful childhood, but there's glimpses of trauma here and there that, and the way I think about it is there's usually it's like a fucked up pearl. Okay, so pearls are created when a piece of sand gets in, the clamshell, and it kind of coagulates and manifests into this thing, and it's often beautiful. And I actually think the same way, right? So when I look at my upbringing, like there's little things that happened where I developed a massive chip on my shoulder. I like working with and hiring people that have a chip on their shoulder, but having a chip on your shoulder is one thing. Recognizing you have a chip on your shoulder is another, right? And so I absolutely have a chip on my shoulder. I'm deeply competitive. I want to win, right? I want the prom queen, right? That's in my competitive spirit. And so, I'd say there's a natural energy level. My mom is super high octane. So I have this ability to kind of tolerate pain, to not need much sleep, and I can operate at a pretty high level. I mean, I'm on 4 hours of sleep now, and 3 hours the night before, and then we traveled. So, but I feel amazing, right? I burn out a lot of people around me, but that's a natural thing. And I absolutely have a chip on my shoulder and the desire to win. I think most competitive spirit comes from a fucked up place, and as long as you can take that and make it a pearl instead of a disaster, I think it's a good thing. But it's a recognition first. Of the trauma, and a recognition of also kind of, frankly, it's like, it's being in the moment. I think more than anything, right? I think so many people fight and win just for the sake of winning versus what the outcome is. I'm trying to be and very focused on being very much recognizing the win while I'm winning and trying to enjoy that more. For a long time, I didn't.
Is that coachable? Like, do you think you could hand that blueprint of minimal sleep, naturally high energy? Do you think people can develop that if they start building momentum in being good at what they do?
I mean, look, some people are born 6'3". I'm not, right? So that's a natural thing. My superpower is my energy level, my ability to have almost a photographic memory for faces. These are little superpowers that happen to translate. What is somewhat coachable is curiosity. I think the more curious you are about people, the more you run into them, the more you're able to connect the dots, and more business comes from that. So I think curiosity is coachable. And really, at the end of the day, I think people need to wet their beaks with success, right? They need a touch of success to kind of like sometimes strap the turbo on. I was able to experience that not early, right? I had a non-linear career. I got into this business 12 years ago. I worked in finance and tech before that with not all success. And so being on the other side of that trade and then having some success, I mean, that's a drug, right? And so maybe I'm an addict in that regard.
Mate, I have to ask, so you said off camera as well that, you know, you were chasing all the cars and the nice things, and you've now got that. What's your why now that you've achieved what you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, we were talking about it. I mean, I think it's very short-sighted or kind of sophomoric to all the stuff, the material shit, right? You know, watches, cars, the houses, whatever that stuff is, right? And by the way, I like all the nice stuff. It's a driving factor, but it's now that I have a lot of those things, and by no means am I wealthy like many of my clients, but I have a lot of the stuff, and what you realize is that stuff like can only drive you so far, right? It can push you. It could push you halfway down the field. But I think you do have to shift out of that at some point. And now, at the end of the day, after really kind of sacrificing my 30s, and I say sacrificing, it's a great outcome. But I took my 30s and I dedicated it to work. And I'm now trying to take my 40s and say, okay, you developed a practice, you saved, you're known for something, you got the things. Where's the freedom? Right? Where's the legacy? Do I want to have a family? Do I want to inspire my fiance and future wife every day? Do I want to be a better person? And that sounds cheesy as shit, but like for someone who stared at Ferraris and, you know, every toy imaginable and had the Rob Report on their coffee table growing up, it's quite fleeting in retrospect, and I'm happy to be on the other side of the hill. But now it's all about freedom, and now it's about really doing nothing that feels obligatory, right? Where I can carve my own path, and that in most people in the world pushes at them, and I want to be in a place where once in a while the world can bend in my direction. And so that's my goal, is to kind of like push, and the world pushes back, and I can do what I want, whatever that is, and whatever I decide, you know, tomorrow or a week from now or 5 years from now.
So you've gotten accustomed to the nice things. Have you gotten accustomed to the big deals?
You know, it's funny. The big deals and the small deals, they all kind of blur together, right? The big deals get the headlines. And you know, I'll be in some magazine or article, and you know, that's not really my jam. I like winning for clients. I'm a total people pleaser, so that's a natural thing. I think being a people pleaser in this business is a really natural skill, because I'm constantly wanting to earn the respect of the client. And so that could be a big deal or a small deal. I did a rental deal last week with someone I'm very inspired by. He's, you know, is a neighbor, in the Hamptons and someone I kind of from a distance look up to. This is a $17,000 rental deal. That was almost as much fun as the big deal. Look, the big deals pay for a lot of shit.
What is your biggest deal?
I sold the most expensive townhouse downtown for $72.5 million. I have the most expensive penthouse on the market, around $75 million right now. We straddle everything from $1 million to $75 million. And I'd say the sweet spot, and I think about this like Moneyball a little bit, if you know the term. Like, there's brokers that swing for the fences and they elephant hunt all day. I don't believe in that. I like the business that it's more well-rounded, that's more base hits than just swinging for the fence. And yeah, and a couple times a year I'll hit a home run. We hit a bunch of triples, but really the first and second base hits, which is a term I don't know if you guys will understand.
Bread and butter.
Yeah. You get it. that stuff is really what pays the bills, and that's the repetition. And to me, having a business that is not just swinging for the fences, but is in the nuts and bolts, is really the core, and that creates a lot of predictability to everyone's business.
Very similar to Alex Phillips, who's our #1 in Australia.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I think I got a chance to meet him before my talk briefly. Yeah.
Cool dude. What's your most memorable deal, and why?
No question. I mean, this one's easy. So, I'm 2 years into the business, and I'm doing well. I'm surviving. I'm starting to thrive. I'm starting to see the matrix. I'm starting to see how things work. And I got a phone call that it completely changed my life. I didn't talk about it on stage because we didn't have enough time, but it was one of those calls where opportunity presented itself and I was prepared. You hear about that shit all the time.
Yeah.
And someone had reached out to me at my desk, which is not somewhere I am often, and called my desk. And someone that worked for him said, "Hey, I'm looking for a rental. Can you help?" And he started describing the rental he was looking for. And I had seen it the day prior. So I knew everything about it, just pure luck. And the conversation switched in the middle of the conversation. I think he expected to have a 2-minute dialogue, and it turned into 20. And it went from him saying, maybe I want to rent that, and I told him it was shit, and he shouldn't, to him saying, well, maybe I should buy something. And he started telling me that he had just went into the week prior to a new development, and he walked in off the street, and they didn't treat him probably as they should because they didn't know who he was. He was a very famous hedge fund guy, but kind of nondescript and very understated gentleman. And I said, well, I know the project really well. Why don't I come meet you? And mind you, I'm 2 years into the gig, right? I had just bought my first apartment, and to cut to, very simply, I walked in. He spent $43 million on the spot. I was paid a 3% fee, and I made $1.2 million. I literally paid for the apartment that I had just bought.
How old were you at the time?
I was 31, and 30, 31, and it was one fell swoop, a 20-minute meeting. I figured out how to negotiate it. Obviously, that was the more complicated part, and it was a technical deal. But that moment changed my life. It gave me a sense of confidence. It put me in the rankings in some way. But more than anything, I just kind of was like, I get it. I can see how this works. And it just, talk about wetting the beak. I became addicted. And also, I developed a great relationship. And I got to, it not only created freedom in my own life, but it felt good to be good at something, right? All of a sudden, I felt like I was naturally good at something. I was doing something that felt very authentic, that I had natural skill sets that would work for this. And if I applied tension and pressure and work ethic to that, that I might be able to make a dent in the industry. And now, 8, 9, 10 years later, we've kind of carved our own little niche.
Why? So that's obviously the sliding doors moment for you where you just turned on the jets. But what were you doing prior to real estate, and why did you get into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time I made an authentic decision, right? So,
Wow.
so after school, I studied finance. I was a pretty good student, and I went to work for a hedge fund out of school because that's kind of what you're supposed to do. In that 2006 era, it was like going to investment banking or go work at a hedge fund, and very quickly I was like, this is not. I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. I was doing it. If someone asked me in an interview, why do you want to do this? I couldn't really give a strong reason. It was just like the right thing to do.
Reading the magazines and the Ferraris and wanted to
exactly.
manifest.
You're like, oh, this is the most predictable way to the end goal.
Yeah.
But I wasn't passionate about it at all. And then that morphed into a 3-year stint in tech, working in San Francisco, which was an amazing experience. And so through those 2 other industries, I met a ton of people, and people knew me from not being a broker, which I actually think is really important. I think I would recommend that everyone goes and does something else in their 20s, personally, because your buyer pool doesn't really start buying homes until their late 20s, right? And I think unless you have a natural network, which I didn't, I did develop a network from working in these other industries. And so that was really kind of a critical thing. And then I came back from California, and I said to myself, I was like kind of depressed. I was like, fuck, what am I going to do? I had a whole bunch of mates who were like doing really well. They were on a certain trajectory, a certain path, and I was kind of floundering. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I had it in me, but I hadn't found my sport. And what happened was I had this authentic conversation, and I said 2 things. 1, what am I good at? Deal making, remembering people, the high of that kind of whole vibe, the social component. And what did I like? And I was busy on real estate websites looking at homes, mostly out of curiosity, right? Mostly from a materialistic standpoint. And so those 2 things came together, and it was kind of like, I was like a fish in water. I mean, and it was the first time I had this deeply authentic conversation with myself. And that authenticity, I think, resonates. And I'm not selling. This is how I think. This is what I believe. And I think people can feel that. That you can't coach.
How often do you have those authentic combos with yourself now?
Fuck, all the time. I mean, all the time. I think you have to kind of check yourself all the time. Look, I've climbed the hill. I've kind of like climbing the fortress walls was more fun than it is defending it now. In some way, and I say that as if like I don't have runway. We got a lot of runway, and I'm very appreciative of this. But I have to check myself. I have a partner who checks me. She doesn't let me get away with shit. And that's why I think that's partially why we're together. Is she's going to keep me honest. And there's really you can have an ego. I can kind of fake an ego at times, but really I don't at my core.
Is there a big difference from landing the $70 million client to the $1 million client? And if so, what is it? Are they longer listing presentations?
It's funny. There isn't consistency. I have a $20 million listing that someone may just know what I do and they'll just call me out of the gates. $75 million listing, I had to go on a pitch against 5 other brokers. And to me, at the end of the day, it's all energy, right? It's every broker is going to show up with the same comp set. They're seemingly probably going to be pretty put together and well dressed and say the right things, and right. There is kind of some consistency. What's not consistent is the energy. And I fundamentally believe that I can be magnetic. I can push stuff out and pull people in. And so at the end of the day, I find that the right listings we get, because I'm attracting them and then they're attracting me, right? If that makes sense. So it doesn't matter if it's $1 million or 50 million. Obviously, we want to shoot for the stars, but in general, what I tell everyone on the pitch when I go in is I tell people very bluntly, I say, I don't need this listing. I want it. I don't need it. I'm deeply competitive. I want this fucking listing, and it's gonna hurt me if I don't get it, and I'm gonna crush it if I do get it, right? And I tell people that because I mean it, right? And we now have, we're fortunate to go after the listings we want. It could be $1 million listing. If it's a fucking vibe, or the seller's a vibe, or there's something interesting, I'm in. It doesn't matter if it's $1 million or if it's 50 million. The end of the day, oftentimes the workload's the same. So there's a scalability to that, which is totally screws with your head. Oftentimes you can spend more money on, not money, but time on the $1 million listing than the $50 million listing. And the other thing to remember is that seller who, has the $1 million listing, it might be their entire net worth.
Yeah.
Where the $50 million person, it's a fraction. And so often the smaller listings can be harder. They can be more emotional. It's more personal and less of a business decision than the larger ones.
What's your routine look like now, and what's changed when you were on the come up? Like, how did you get Clay to be able to really excel and sell these properties?
The routine is kind of the same. I have more confidence now. I have a larger team around me. I'd say what has changed significantly is, instead of just worrying about myself, in the beginning it was like, keep it small, keep it all. That was my mentality, right? I had one assistant, it was just me, and kind of we cranked. And now I spend a portion of my time thinking about the team, thinking about my partner, thinking about having some empathy, worrying about how they're performing, doing some light coaching, not even coaching. I try to be a therapist, certain days for not just my clients, but for my team members.
Therapist.
And so time. Oh, I'm not a broker. Monkey can open a door. That's easy, right? I'm a therapist, and I'm an insurance policy, right? Therapy is coaching people through big decisions, why they should do it, not just from a economic standpoint, but from a, does this make sense? And then I'm an insurance policy. You don't need me maybe 90% of the time, right? A monkey can open the door. But that 10% of the time, if you don't have the right broker working for you, you're fucked, right? That's the differentiating factor. And so I say this all the time. I'm not a broker. I'm an advisor, but really I'm a therapist and I'm an insurance policy.
So you obviously had to work extremely hard to get to this point. How are you maintaining a healthy relationship with your partner while you're working these hours?
She would love this conversation. Quality time is a huge component of her love language, and I'm a doer. So my love language is acts of service. So I do a million things a day. I'm whack-a-mole, and then I expect her to just be like, "Don't you feel my love? Look at all the things I did." So I'm having to. It's a huge leap for me to reorient my priorities. Understand that I've won the race. Recognition of winning. I think a lot of people just want to take 1,000 victory laps. I don't think I'm going to take 1,000. I'm not saying I have an end goal, because I have this kind of, unlimited energy that has to go somewhere. I'm like a lab. You got to run me. The Australian Shepherd. You got to take me out and run me. So the energy's got to go somewhere. But I'm reorienting myself a lot now into what matters. It's not the material things. It's really quality time with her. Hopefully a family. And hopefully kind of I think Tim Glover said, it's like you have only so many beats in your heart, and kind of recognition of that. That doesn't mean taking your foot off the gas. It just means maybe not letting the speed bumps hurt as much. I want the speed bumps to feel like little ripples, in your car, and you're like, oh, that was a speed bump. I kind of want them to be like, oh, was that a speed bump? That kind of shift in my mindset, where hopefully things don't bother me as much, where hopefully I'm not as reactive. I'm pretty sensitive, right? I have a sensitive constitution, so I'm trying to reorient myself a lot to kind of being much more calm through my day versus always high octane, high cortisol levels, all that, which is quite unhealthy.
Do you have any spiritual practice, meditation, breathwork that helps you center?
She has a shit ton. I mean, Elizabeth has a ton. I mean, she's got a whole podcast called The Wellness Process that is about these modalities. I'm not as practiced. I did transcendental meditation for years, and then just was having a tough time with giving up 20 minutes of the day and thinking about my phone. So that was a huge challenge.
Can I ask you on that though, Clay? Do you think it can be more productive at times when you are high performance and you want to get shit done to just start by ripping in? Like, sometimes that morning routine can delay people from just getting what needs to be done.
Yeah, look, for me, it's protecting my health. Like, I was waking up in the morning and my cortisol levels would spike, and like I'd wake up with pure adrenaline, and like, I mean, I'll be up for 10 seconds. I pick up my phone and I've got problems, and I'm like, my heart's through the roof. So there has to be, not necessarily for me just a practice, but like a pause. I take a minute to pause before I get on my ATM machine, right? That's my ATM machine, and like that's my problem that I have to deal with all day long. And I really care about the client. And so I think if you find something that works, great. For me, more than anything, I find that sports where I'm not on my phone or a meditation of sorts. If I go to the gym, like in between sets, I'm like fucking looking at my phone, yeah. So that's not really helpful. But when I go surfing, no phone, right? When I play tennis, no phone. When I was cycling, phones shoved in the back, right? And so you couldn't be on it, and that was very meditative. It's been very meditative for me to kind of like be singularly focused on the task in front of me versus like 100 of these things going on. Because with the business as big as it is now, there's literally like hundreds of problems. I deal with thousands of text messages and WhatsApps a day. Like, processing that is brutal. And so finding a place where I can calm myself, pump the brakes, and have moments of peace. Really, if anything, it's kind of in nature. I bought the beach house as like almost a meditative space for myself. We're building a meditation room. We're calling it the wellness room, but we're building a space that's like trees in the windows and birds chirping and all of the things. So we're creating some stuff.
Do you think, Clay, you will transition from being an on-the-tools surgeon to getting paid for your elite ability to solve problems and think? So you might go to this new meditation space and be able to really give yourself time to process to then go and do higher level surgeries or shoot a sharper sniper? Yeah,
it's like what's the next step, right? I, unlike a lot of brokers, I like the surgery. I'm not a coach. That's my first time ever talking on stage, right? So I mean, I think I did okay, but it's not what I'm like desiring to be.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be the next Tony Robbins, right? I really like performing the surgery. I get a high off of it. I do think I have another gear, I think there's another gear, and I think that gear might be doing development. I think I'd be great at building hotels. I'm very detail-oriented. I like people. I like the experience. I like thinking about how all this stuff comes together in community. So I think that could be, and I've had a number of people kind of say that to me over the years. I just don't have the fucking time. And in this moment right now where we're on that perfect wave and it's cresting over me, I'm kind of locked in, and I just want to perform the surgeries and be the best surgeon in this moment right now.
What would you give your younger self advice? Like, what would you tell your younger self starting out in real estate now today, or the best piece of advice for yourself back then?
I mean, first, like, definitely relax. I'm not a relaxed person. This is as most relaxed as I've been in my whole life. But I wasn't relaxed because I was so worried about my future, like so incredibly worried about what I was going to be, if I was going to be a failure. I'd give myself a pat on the, kind of a hug, and be like, take it in strides, slow down, pay attention, not be so judgmental, not be so quick to make decisions, and enjoy the ride. I wish I could continue to feel those early deals that I did. I was so busy. You know, I use this analogy a lot. In the early days, you're kind of like a rocket ship. And you're strapped in and you're closing your eyes and it's fucking turbulent and it's vibrating like crazy. And you hope you're pointing in the right direction. And you're worried as fuck the thing might blow up, right? And so I think about that analogy like being a rocket. And then all of a sudden you pierce the veil and you pierce through the atmosphere, and all of a sudden what happens? All of that noise goes and everything gets quiet. And that's the beauty. That's where I wish I knew I would get to, because now being in orbit where it is quiet, I have time to make small adjustments and thrusts that can put you on a massive trajectory based on which way you thrust, but it's quiet and it's calm. I would enjoy that the thrill of the rocket, but not worry about it as much. I think I had way too many sleepless nights.
Yeah, mate.
It sounds like that resonates.
Yeah, it does. Just out of curiosity, my last question for you, Clay, is what do you find now is holding you back from going to that next gear?
Time. Time. I mean, I'm so focused on and such a perfectionist. I probably am limiting myself from another gear.
What would need to change? Like, how could we unlock that gear?
You know, I haven't figured it out.
More Wingman VAs.
Had to say something.
I mean, look, there's a scaling issue, right? That's always the problem. Certainly if I could figure out how to use, VAs more, right? That would jack things up. I haven't perfected that yet. Scaling and replicating myself is not easy. It seems like that's the future between ChatGPT, virtual assistants, non-traditional techniques. I think just hiring people around you is not the future. I think artificial intelligence or distanced intelligence is a way to basically scale yourself. I think that is the future. We're implementing some of those. Obviously, we're implementing ChatGPT, and we've implemented Wingman into what we're doing. I think if I had time to focus on that more, I think there are people that absolutely have figured this out. I'm not the guy that counts my day by 15-minute increments, but I think if someone taught me about that, I think there would be incredible ways to scale myself in a more meaningful way.
My last
hopefully
question.
we'll see you selling and buying overseas soon.
I love it, yeah.
My last question for you. Do the Knicks have what it takes to take it all the way and win the NBA Finals?
I think it's a pretty gnarly question. People are bugging out right now. I don't think it's gonna happen. But you know what? The city feels alive.
Yeah. The Knicks fans are wild.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're not as bad as football, soccer fans, but the city feels alive. And I think more than anything, what's great is to see that New York's alive. Yeah. Right? New York during COVID, only 5 years ago was kind of on the down and out, and the city's never been stronger. It's great to see. I mean, we'd love a fucking win, right? It would really be a cherry on top. But I think more than anything, I think the city just feels incredible. Happy to be there. Happy to be selling those beautiful real estate. Some of the most interesting real estate in the world. In a very special place, and I appreciate you guys having me. It's amazing to travel. It's the furthest I've ever traveled in my life. Kind of took a leap of faith to come here, wow. and it paid off. And my fiance said, fuck it, why not? And I'm happy we came out.
Well, welcome to Australia,
mate. We need
mate.
to get Clay to the eastern suburbs of Sydney and get him doing deals down there too.
Yep.
Listen, I'd love to come out and be a hammer and have you guys come out and spend some time with me in New York.
Let's do it.
Mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.